Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going way back in time to explore a fascinating mystery.
Ooh, a mystery.
Yeah, right. A mystery that connects paleontology and climate change with a
Oh.
little bit of detective work. And I know you're interested in these topics, so I think you'll find this one pretty interesting.
Well, I mean, who doesn't love a good mystery? Especially one that involves ancient plants and, clues to our planet's past.
Yeah, exactly. So our story takes place at the Brea Tar Pits in Los Angeles,
Oh.
which is this incredible paleontological site
Yep.
right in the middle of the city.
I've heard about it. It's amazing.
It's amazing. And our main character today is not a saber-toothed cat or a giant mammoth. It's actually a tiny juniper seed.
Really?
Yeah, it's barely bigger than...
What? Like, how big are we talking?
Well, the article we're looking at says
Five.
it's about as big as Lincoln's forehead on a penny.
Wow, that is tiny. I love that detail.
Yeah.
It's amazing how something so small can unlock such a huge story.
I know. I totally agree. So this tiny seed and a few fossilized branchlets help scientists identify a brand new juniper species at the tar pits.
Oh, wow. What species?
It's called Juniperus scapulorum,
Hmm.
better known as the Rocky Mountain juniper.
Okay.
And the article we're looking at today is from SciTech Daily, published just a few days ago on January 3rd, 2025. It's called Identification of Mysterious Fossil Seed Solves 47,000-Year-Old Tar Pit Mystery.
Okay, so it's a mystery because this juniper doesn't actually grow in Southern California
Yeah,
today.
right. Exactly. So how did it get there?
Yeah. And what does that tell us about, the history of that region?
Exactly. Those are the questions that the researchers wanted to figure out.
Okay.
So they knew there were two types of juniper fossils at the tar pits, but they couldn't figure out what this smaller seeded one was.
Well, extracting DNA from those tar pit fossils is super hard
Yeah.
just because of the way that they're preserved.
Yeah.
So they had to turn into detectives and use other methods.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So what did they do?
Well, they used a few things. First, they used advanced microscopy and image analysis
Oh, wow.
to compare the fossil seed and branchlet structures to other juniper species.
So like matching fingerprints, but on a microscopic level.
Exactly. And then they also use something called species distribution modeling,
Okay.
which basically helps predict where a species could have lived based on its environmental preferences and also, past climate data.
It's like a virtual map of where this juniper might have liked to grow.
Exactly. It's really cool they were able to narrow it down until they found a match.
That's amazing. So they figured out that this ancient Rocky Mountain juniper needed a very different climate
Yeah.
than what we see in Southern California today.
Way different. It actually points to a time when Southern California was much wetter.
Really?
Yeah. This discovery and the first ever radiocarbon dating of fossilized plants from that region
Wow.
shows that Southern California used to be home to forests and woodlands,
Wow.
supporting species that only live way farther north these days.
So the article mentions this sort of dance between this new juniper and the California juniper,
Yeah.
which still grows in the area.
Right.
What's that all about?
It's a pretty amazing pattern that they found. By radiocarbon dating those juniper fossils, scientists found that these two species actually replaced each other periodically at the tar pits
Okay.
for like 47,000 years.
So like taking turns being the dominant species?
Yeah, like a botanical tango. And this dance shows us the history of like dryness and drought in that region. So when the Rocky Mountain juniper was dominant, it means there was probably more moisture,
Oh.
a climate closer to what it likes today up in the Rocky Mountains. And then as things got drier, the California juniper took over because it can handle those conditions.
It's like they had this 47,000-year-long climate record written in the junipers.
Exactly. And what makes it so cool, especially with your interest in climate change, is that it shows us how ecosystems responded to climate shifts way back then.
Yeah, the La Brea tar pits are so fascinating.
Right.
It's not just a place where extinct animals ended up. It's like a time capsule for understanding the history of climate and ecosystems.
Totally.
But what eventually happened to the Rocky Mountain juniper in Southern California? Why did it disappear?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Hmm.
And we start to see how everything in the ecosystem is connected.
Ooh, okay. I'm hooked now. Let's hear it. Okay, so we've got these changing climates, these dancing junipers,
Right.
but the Rocky Mountain juniper disappears from Southern California.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, climate change was definitely part of it.
Okay.
It pushed the Rocky Mountain juniper out of its comfort zone. But there might be something else, too. The article suggests that the disappearance of those Ice Age megafauna
Oh, you mean like the mammoths, mastodons,
Yeah.
saber-toothed cats? All
Exactly.
those amazing creatures
Right.
that used to roam around?
And you might be thinking, what do giant herbivores have to do with junipers?
Yeah, good point. I'm curious.
Well, this is where we see how connected everything in the ecosystem is.
Okay, I'm listening.
So think about those megafauna as ecosystem engineers,
Okay.
like gardeners, but on a massive scale.
Wow.
Right. Their grazing would have shaped the landscape, clearing out dense vegetation, making open spaces.
Oh, I see.
And they would have trampled the ground, turning up the soil.
Okay.
Even their dung would have been like fertilizer,
Oh, wow.
enriching the soil and helping plants grow.
So they weren't just cool to look at, they actually shaped the whole environment.
Exactly. And researchers think that the way they shaped the landscape actually helped the junipers.
Really?
Yeah. Imagine a landscape with open woodlands maintained by all those grazing animals. That's perfect for the Rocky Mountain juniper.
Oh, so when those megafaunas disappeared, it wasn't just losing a few big animals, it changed the whole ecosystem.
Right, like removing a keystone from an arch.
Mm.
The whole structure becomes unstable.
Great analogy. And the extinction of these megafauna gardeners probably caused by climate change and maybe early human activity?
Yeah.
Probably had a domino effect on everything else. Made it harder for species like the Rocky Mountain juniper to survive.
Exactly.
Which leads us to another part of this story,
Hmm.
and this one's closer to home. Humans. The article says that early humans, even with their limited technology, might have actually contributed to the juniper's decline.
Oh, really?
Yeah, especially through using fire.
Right. Fire has always been a natural part of a lot of ecosystems.
Yeah.
But the way early humans used fire,
Mm-hmm.
whether on purpose or not,
Yeah.
could have really changed how often and how intense fires were in Southern California.
Okay.
And that would have been a big problem for junipers.
Yeah, especially because junipers are not very good with fire.
Exactly. Unlike some trees that can actually withstand or even benefit from wildfires,
Right.
junipers are not very well adapted, their bark is thin, and they don't have those fire-resistant cones.
Oh.
So in a drier climate, with more frequent fires, probably started by humans, the Rocky Mountain juniper would have been really vulnerable.
So it's like a chain reaction. Climate change pushed them to their limit. The loss of the megafauna changed their habitat. And then human-caused fires were the final straw.
Yeah, it all adds up.
Eventually leading to their extinction in Southern California.
It's a pretty powerful reminder that even thousands of years ago, humans could reshape ecosystems and cause extinctions.
And it's a little scary because we're seeing similar things happening today.
Yeah, we are. Climate change is pushing species out of their habitats. We're losing habitats.
Mm-hmm.
And human activities are still putting a lot of pressure on the natural world. It's like history is trying to warn us. But are we listening?
Right, that's the question. This ancient extinction event, all because of a tiny juniper seed, gives us some really important lessons for conservation today.
Definitely.
So what do you think is the most important takeaway from all of this?
Well, for me, it's remembering that everything's connected.
Yeah.
We can't just look at species on their own. We have to think about the entire web of life.
Yeah.
All the connections between climate ecosystems and what we humans are doing.
And we have to remember that even small actions, like starting a fire, can have consequences that we don't even realize,
Right.
impacting ecosystems and species for generations.
It's true. This whole deep dive has really got me thinking.
Me too. It's
Yeah.
a lot to take in. Wow. It's amazing how we started with this tiny juniper seed and uncovered this whole story about climate change and ecosystems.
No, it's incredible, right? It really shows how powerful science can be when it comes to, piecing together the past.
Absolutely. So let's recap what we've learned from this deep dive into the world of ancient junipers.
Okay. Sounds good.
So we started with the discovery of this brand new juniper species at the Brea Tar Pits,
Right.
the Rocky Mountain juniper, which doesn't even grow in Southern California anymore.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing they found it there.
And that discovery helped us uncover this 47,000-year-old record of climate change, reflected in that dance between the Rocky Mountain juniper and the California juniper.
Right, like taking turns depending on whether the climate was wetter or drier.
Exactly. But it wasn't just about climate.
Right.
We also talked about the role of those Ice Age megafauna.
Those giant herbivores.
Yeah, which were like ecosystem engineers shaping the landscape in ways that might have actually helped the Rocky Mountain juniper.
Yeah. And when they disappeared, that was a major shift for the whole ecosystem.
Right, probably because of climate change and maybe early human activity.
Oh, the combination of things.
And then we added another layer to this story. Humans.
Yeah.
Even early humans with their limited technology might have impacted the juniper's decline.
Especially with fire.
Yeah, fire was the big one. It might have tipped the scales for that juniper population.
Especially since junipers aren't adapted to frequent fires.
Right.
It all paints a really vivid picture of how interconnected everything is.
Yeah, it really does. Climate, ecosystems, human actions, it's all connected.
And it's a reminder that even thousands of years ago, humans could have a big impact on the environment.
And it's still happening today.
Definitely.
It makes you wonder, are we really learning from the past?
That's the big question, isn't it?
So what do you think is the biggest takeaway from all this? What can we learn from this ancient juniper and its story?
Well, I think it shows us that even though the Rocky Mountain juniper eventually went extinct in Southern California, it was pretty resilient for a long time.
That's true.
It survived a lot of changes. And I think that gives us some hope. It shows that even small actions can make a difference.
Yeah.
And that understanding how everything is connected in nature is so important for protecting it.
I totally agree. It's a huge challenge, but it's also an opportunity to really make a positive impact.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the past, I want to leave you with this question. What can we do in our own lives to learn from this story? How can we be better stewards of the planet and protect the amazing diversity of life that we have? That's all for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us and keep exploring.